welcome to the round 11 preview. As the Blues are back at home at Marvel Stadium to take on the Gold Coast Suns Saturday afternoon, 1:45 p.m. It's the first Saturday afternoon time slot for us in that particular time slot for the year. And we are coming off an awful performance. I think an awful, dreadful letdown of a performance. And the first one in a long time. Obviously the first one for the year, but the first one in a long time. And we come up against a Gold Coast team who have performed to their absolute optimal. So we're getting the Suns at their best, playing their best football. They've broken all sorts of records. They're coming off a 64-point win in Darwin last Thursday against the Cats. Granted, Hawkins, Duncan, Jeremy Cameron missing, but I mean, if you watch the game, they kicked 26 goals, 8. Extremely efficient, 164 points, which was a club record for them. And I've spoken a lot about 5-day breaks and, 3 games in 12 days that we've had. They performed like that last week, the Gold Coast Suns, off a 5-day break. So I guess that goes to show how much your mentality means more than anything. And I think we find ourselves in a spot where we're sort of going back and forth, win-loss, win-loss. On the one hand, I'm thinking, it's been a really tough stretch in the sense of we're playing the best opponents that the competition has to offer. But I think anytime you start to potentially believe that your fixture is going to get a little easier is the time that, that's a dangerous thought to have. So I'm not taking this game as a release of pressure from a tough fixture because we're playing these teams, at the top of their game. We both sit 6-4. That's the reality. Both are in, I don't know where I would say the Suns are at. Obviously, new coach, Dimmer's over there. He has cleaned out the older players and he's brought in these new players and I guess started playing, the future of the Gold Coast Footy Club. And he's got them playing inspired, direct, connected footy. They're very impressive to watch. Last week was a shock to my system watching the way that they completely dismantled the Cats, who, 2-3 weeks ago were seemingly unbeatable, so experienced, etc. So this is an important game. I think this is a game for Carlton which will show the pride of the group, after such a letdown of effort. I do understand the need to stay calm and stay composed in the heat of a season. There will be disappointing losses. I guess you've got to limit them. And for a side like us who have talked about the need to start being a consistent regular season football team, last week was so far off the mark for what that's going to be, what that will require us to do. And so I would have expected that this week was a harsh review. I mean, you can't hide. You lose the way we did last week. There's nowhere to hide. Your midfield gets absolutely battered. You put your defenders under pressure. We swung magnets left, right, and center. It was so bad. It was off. And I think there is a little bit of a fear from where we have been as a club, particularly in this generation, to see how poorly our application was. And it reminded me of 2021. We said it in the fan cams last week. What Friday night reminded me of was, North Melbourne 2021. Just too easy for our opponents to score, to move around the ground. They just chopped us up. And on the one hand, am I fearful that it's a deeper issue? A little bit, of course. But sometimes the seeds of doubt are important. We've had a pretty good run, but I think it's a dangerous mindset to think that just because we made the prelim last year and the like, the game moves quickly. And I think if you get caught up relying too much on what happened last year, for the good and the bad, I think that can expose you a little bit. And so I go into this week saying, should be winning. This is a game, not to discredit the Suns, but we need to win this game. This is an important game to stay in the race. This is a league right now that has 5 teams with the exact same record as what we do right now, 6-4. Gold Coast are one of them. We sit 10th on the ladder right now. That'll obviously reveal itself at the end of round 24. But, I think you draw confidence from what you were able to do last year because you're capable and you had done it and you'd found yourself in, let's be honest, a much deeper hole than what it looks like we're in right now. And then on the other hand, there's the fear of that backlash. We spoke about it on Monday night on the Blue Abroad show. We spoke about, and I don't know the answer to this question, but does the club, do the playing group, the coaching staff, the club in general, do they have a fear of what happened last year in the low point, the fan backlash? And it's such an interesting question. I think there's nothing wrong with having a bit of a fear of what the worst looks like because you know what it can look like. But I think if you let that seep in too much, you can lose focus. And this is a group that we can't rely on our foot skills to get us through games. If we don't bring that full focus, which we've seen, if we don't bring it, we don't bring that intensity, we are bang average. That's where we are right now. You can have all the talent on the park, which we still do, irrespective of the injury list, which we'll touch on shortly. There is a lot of talent in this team. It's undeniable. It's not going to cut it relying on the talent to get you through the individual brilliance. It's just not going to work. We are not that team. If we're not a blue-collar, hardworking, resilient, vicious team, we are just middle of the road. And I think that's the type of game and that's the type of approach I'd like to see this week. No, I expect to see a vicious team. I expect to see a vicious response. I think, you're going to have your ups and downs. It's never going to be linear. When you have a low point of performance like what we did last week, the response is critical. And so I have a lot of confidence that they're going to respond and they're not going to come out the way they did against the Swans last week for the 4 quarters. But obviously as a supporter, we've been through so much with this club. We've been through so many years of, just not a good enough application for 4 quarters that, of course, there is that little fear in there that, oh God, is there a problem? Is it an alarm bell? Yeah, and I do think it's healthy to have a bit of a seed of doubt. I think you can get way too far ahead of yourself if you just assume everything's going to be okay. I think things will be okay in the long run because I have faith in the group because they've earned that over the last 12 months. But like I said, you get too caught up in that, you get found out, other teams run past you. So, obviously looking forward to it. It'll tell a lot about the group's prospect in 2024, the way they respond this week. No doubt about it. And I think that's undeniable. When it comes to availability and what's going to happen with team selection, I'm hoping to get a couple back. Vossi alluded to the fact that Motlop and Sard would be back. He alluded to it in the press conference after the game on Friday night. Sard completely, we need him because he has such a high IQ. We don't have many of those types of players in the team. He's got a bit of foot speed as well. He takes the game on, breaks lines, but he uses the ball so well. He's just another layer of trust in there. Motlop's an interesting one because we haven't seen him all season. He had he stubbed his toe in the preseason game against the D's and then, hamstring. So I'm mindful of, I understand on the one hand, Durden and Fantasia and these types, they're not going very well. They're not in form. And so obviously we know we want Motlop and Martin back so badly. And I think we're in such an important point of the season now that we can't afford to be getting it wrong with some of these players. And there's always going to be risk involved. I think anyone that takes the field on Saturday afternoon. There's always a risk involved. They're sore bodies now. We're in that point in the year where it starts to accumulate. They're not going into games 100% right now. There's always a little niggle that is there. But it's just so important that we get it right with these guys. We can't afford to be having guys come back from injury layoffs only to get injured again. How can you prevent that? Do you just give them an extra week? Does Motlop come back via the VFL? Obviously on form, you want to get him in because you know how good he is and can be. But is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is his body 100% right? I guess what I'm saying is I don't want us to rush players back just because there is that fear of what happens if we lose, or what happens if it's not good enough, what happens if the fans react, what happens if that pressure starts mounting. This is the game, and this is the Carlton Football Club. And as much as you have to stay calm throughout it, and that's important, and not harm, because you're either helping or you're harming, and you don't want to harm the club by putting too much stress on the players. There is stress. They already have stress. They already have their own expectations internally. I've got no doubt Michael Voss is keeping things at a very high standard and reviewing things in a very matter-of-fact, tough way. But when you see what happened last week, it's like, hang on a minute. We can't be having that. If we come out with that mentality this week, the Suns will probably do the same thing. They did what they did last week in Darwin, off a 5-day break, sweltering conditions, super hot, sweaty, greasy. They stayed there the week prior as well, so they played there the week before. And yeah, there's a little bit of, I think the pressure of the season is starting to mount. Early on, you want to get some games under people's belts. You've got time. We are about to enter. We're nearly halfway. So with that, the pressure mounts. You got to win enough games to qualify for finals. If you want to win a premiership, you most likely, if not definitely, have to be in the top 4. And so that can sometimes take you away from the moment and the process and get you thinking a little far ahead. And that's dangerous. You have to acknowledge it. You have to understand it, but you can't. There's a balance with how much you read into it. And so that's where the challenge for the group is. This is a new era right now. What we did last year is done. We can't rely on it too much. You can draw confidence, but you can't rely on it too much to get you through this year. So it's a tough game. It's a tough matchup, which I love. The conditions will obviously be perfect. There'll be no issue with that. Marvel Stadium, I'm going to assume it's going to be packed out. We'll get there. We had 26,000 people there last year at the MCG. I'm hoping we eclipse that this year at Marvel. Last year was obviously when things started turning around against the Suns. And I think the way we played against them is how they're playing right now, which is where that fear comes in. So we've got to get it right. We've got to get the boys back in the side. We've got to settle the side. But more than anything, you've got to bring the right mentality, because it doesn't matter who is in that side. If they don't have the mentality to put the work in and do it the hard way, we're average, we get found out. And so that's how I'm feeling about this week. It's about pride. Like, how much did last week disappoint themselves? How much do they have a pride in that performance? How much are they going to respond? What's it going to look like? We go from there. The Suns get their hands to the footy first really well. There'll be no issue with them matching us on the inside. They've got the players to do it. What they also have, they've got high IQ players. I think of Anderson. I think of Sam Flanders. You get the ball in the hands of these guys too many times in a game, and they'll carve you up. So, yeah, it's getting real. It started to get real. It's always been real, but the reality of the week to week and how tight this competition is really comes to the front of mind. So we'll see. We will see. Now for you, what are you thinking about this game? How do you preview this game? What are you looking for in this game? Is it just as simple as you got to respond? Do you have concerns that we're in a bit of a patch where are we going into another hole? How much do you actually look back on last year and use what happened for the positive or the negative this week? I've noticed a little bit of trepidation. I get it. Look at where we've come from. Look at what we've overcome. I take confidence from it because they know the standard. They've had to learn the hard way what the standard is in how to approach games and what they have to do. So, yeah, tough one. Real tough one. That'll do us. Chat to you in the comments below. Let me know what you think. We'll go from there. Come on, Blues. Turn it around. Have some pride and get the job done.